Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Aviation Spotters podcast. I am your host, Colin. This is a quick reminder to go check out our Facebook page, Aviation Spotters Podcast, and also to share this with your network. We have been getting some lower viewership. I understand that, it's a pretty niche market for this, but if you know an av geek that you think would really like to listen to the show, or anybody else would, or just if they're interested in aviation or aviation photography or just that in general, make sure to share this with them. I really would appreciate it because I would like to get it out there. A lot of the av geeks that I want to have on the show will be able to hear it and be interested in coming on and getting to the main purpose of this podcast. With that being said, this is episode 9 of the AvSP, and here with me today is Mr. Owen Hewitt from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Owen, how you doing this afternoon?
Man, I'm great. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. Thank you for taking up the offer and coming on. I know you messaged me really early on saying you're really interested in coming on the show, and I said, you know what? Let's pull the trigger and make it happen. You take some absolutely astonishing photos, and why not showcase them?
I do appreciate it.
Of course, man. Well, let's get to know you a little bit. So, you're from Spartanburg, South Carolina, and how did you get into aviation spotting and stuff like that?
So, yeah, I currently live in the upstate of South Carolina, but I've been in different parts of South Carolina all my life, and grew up in Florence. And back many years ago, they used to have an Air Force base at Myrtle Beach, and one of your favorite aircraft was based there, the A-10.
Oh, nice.
And they would often do practice flights, and so I'd always had curiosity, what the heck is that plane? It's kind of weird looking, right? And so that just kind of piqued my interest in military aviation. I'm fairly close to Shaw Air Force Base, so of course they fly the F-16, and I did at one time live in Charleston, and Charleston is home of the C-17, and so that's another aircraft that I would often see flying over my head. I'm age 46, so I bet you money I'm the oldest guest you've had so far.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I'm on my second marriage, 3 years, my wife Lindsay, and I've got 3 girls, Christy Lake, Elizabeth Lee, and Mary Elliott, currently at Myrtle Beach this week. Yeah, that's me.
I'm assuming Myrtle Beach isn't as busy as it normally would be this time of year, though, right?
Oh, it's pretty packed from what I understand. Yeah, there's still visitors.
Well, at least it's helping the local tourist economy, but this is a double-edged sword, I guess. But yeah, so Charleston, they have one of the largest units of C-17s, right?
Absolutely,
on the East Coast.
In fact, it was the very first home when it first came on. Charleston became a kind of the C-17 master jet base, and people would come there. In fact, the UK came, and when they got their planes, they came to Charleston to train. So it's kind of the home of the C-17.
That's pretty cool. I knew they had a large base, and actually one of my friends I went to school with, she went over there to become a loadmaster for the C-17, and I think she's still over there. So also South Carolina, they also have a Guard F-16 squadron, right? Are they also based out of Shaw?
Nope, they're actually at McIntyre, which is not very far from Shaw. It's about 20 minutes from Shaw, so it's about an hour and 40 minutes for me drive. But yeah, they carry the Block 52 of the F-16CM, and Shaw carries the F-16 CM. They've got the Block 50 version.
Okay, and the Block 52 and the Block 50s, they just had different engines in them, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest difference. There's a few other little minor things with the shape of the intake, but for the most part, yeah, it's mostly the power plant.
Okay. Yeah, no, the reason I ask is because in 2017 for the air show out here in Boise, we had 2 Swamp Foxes show up at Static.
Yeah, you can't miss the tail on those with the proud South Carolina on them.
Yeah, one of them was actually the Have Glass paint. One was newer coming out, which is actually really cool to see.
Sweet.
Real quick, so I think since you're an F-16 guy, you might know this. This is a question I have. So you see, you have an F-16CM, and then you have an F-16CJ. Do you know what the difference between those two are?
I really don't. I know for Shaw and McIntyre, the CM as you often see those little pods hanging off the sides of the intake, and from what I understand is it has a lot of ground following type, navigational unit type stuff in them, and I'm not really certain what the J would be different. I'm thinking it's probably an enhancement beyond the M.
All right. Well, we can always research that. If I can find some research on, I'll put in the show notes for the listener if they're curious. So what would you consider your home airport then?
My closest airport is Greenville-Spartanburg Airport, which is mostly civilian aircraft. But from a military standpoint, the closest to me is Shaw, McIntyre, and Charleston.
Okay. Well, out of those, I think I know what your answer is, and we get into it later. But out of those three bases, which one would you prefer?
Oh, definitely Shaw is my favorite. A lot more activity. Of course, the Viper demo team's based there, so definitely have an opportunity to catch them, once in a while when they're doing their practice. So that's definitely a good one. But McIntyre is pretty cool. I'll talk about this maybe later in the podcast.
Yeah.
But I got a chance to visit and hang out with an Apache pilot a couple weeks back, and he showed me around a little bit, and I was able to get a little closer to the Apaches, and just so happened to watch a couple F-16s take off.
Oh man, that's you can't beat that. Apaches and Vipers.
Yeah, right.
Oh, in the same afternoon. Oh yeah, man. So what other hobbies do you have outside of aviation?
Well, really, here lately, it's just been doing a lot of yard work, paying attention to it a little bit more than I have been. My wife, she does a lot of DIY type stuff, so I often will pitch in and help her out. Sometimes she needs some drilling or cutting or something like that done. But about 10, 15 years ago, I was very active in developing third-party aircraft for Microsoft FlightSim.
Oh, no way.
I used to do some development work with a couple groups you may or may not have heard of. One of them, FSD International, EagleSoft, and Iris Flight Simulation.
No way.
Yep, I've done some of that development work. But that takes a tremendous amount of time. I just don't have that time anymore.
Yeah, I used to fly that Iris F-15E Mudhead driver religiously, and then I lost my thing. I got in contact with them, and they don't sell it anymore. It's just like, it's such a really epic airplane to fly, and just with me being out here with the F-15E being 45 miles from my house, it just kind of sucks that I'm not able to fly that plane anymore on my flight sim. But yeah, I've heard of all those. I've actually flown FlightSim developers, FSD, man, that's some good stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed the products.
Yeah, my favorite was the Turbo Porter. That one was a really fun one to work on with my other modeler friend Jim.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So are you guys planning on doing anything for the new Microsoft FlightSim coming out?
I have no idea. Like I said, I haven't dabbled in that field for over 10 years. It just takes way too much time, and I'd rather spend my time with a camera in my hand.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I mean, at least it was something that you got something to do and some time-consuming stuff. But that's really cool that you did that. I always actually kind of wondered, how hard is it to make a aircraft like that for a simulator? What type of software and just how time-consuming is it?
Again, if you can remember how the airplanes looked in Microsoft 2000 or FlightSim 2000, it wasn't very complex. But then as you got into, toward FSX, right, the last version that they really published, the polygon count and the detail allowed was tremendously more. But because of that complexity allowance, customers would want the most realism possible. So it would exponentially expand the amount of time it takes to develop, unless you've got, a whole team of people. I did most of the modeling type things, the external model, the internal model, and all the graphics, all that had to be designed using 3D Studio Max was what I used. And Photoshop was what I used to create the paint schemes.
Okay. Yeah, I've tried doing some custom paint jobs for, certain aircraft. Like I have a Phantom and I want to put in the Idaho colors, and, it's just going like, man, I have a lot of respect for these guys that, that's what they do and they are fantastic at it, because it's not easy to do if you're just getting into it at all.
Yeah, it's definitely, the learning curve's pretty steep.
Absolutely. Oh man, let's move it on. So let's talk about cameras. What is your current setup?
Well, currently I'm running a Nikon D500. I've got it married up to a Sigma 100 and 400.
Okay.
So that's kind of my aerial camera. I do have another body that I had prior to that, the D7200, and I've got a 24 to 70 Sigma on that one, just for ground shots, wider angle. And so those are my two main cameras right at this moment. I'm looking at potentially getting the Nikon 200 to 500. Tested it out a few weeks back. A guy had one and let me use it. Sucker's a beast. It's a huge lens, but it gave me a quite a bit more reach than my 100 to 400. I'm possibly going to try to find one of those used.
Yeah.
But way back, I'd say late 90s, I started using old film cameras. In fact, I started out with a Pentax ZX10, right? So that one, and so this was back before digital cameras really came on the scene from a consumer standpoint. And then Pentax came out with what they called the ISTD. Because I had Pentax before, I said, well, I might as well stick to it. I got lenses, I don't want to do away with the lenses I had. So I moved to the Pentax, and I kept it for quite a number of years. Got out of the hobby of really doing a lot of aviation type stuff for a few years. I was, doing my flight simulation. And then I got froggy one time and decided to go get a kit at, I think it was a Sam's. And I saw, they had a Canon set up, and then they had a Nikon set up, and what I saw at what they had at that very moment, the specs were a little bit better on the Nikon. So I went with the Nikon, and that was a 5100. So I kept it for quite a while, and then moved to the 7200, still have it, and then about 2 years ago got the D500.
Very nice. And the D500, that's a full frame, right?
It's crop sensor. It's their top of the line crop sensor. So it still gives me that 1.5 reach. It shoots a tremendous amount of frames per second. It's got an enormous buffer on it compared to that 7200. So it's primarily why I got it, because it still gives me the reach. It's got a decent megapixel. Some point down the road, I'll probably go full frame. I've considered maybe doing the mirrorless, but I hadn't jumped to that just yet.
Yeah, that's what John said on episode 6 when we were talking about photography and cameras. Is there's really, and you don't need a full frame. You don't need to spend $4,000 on a full frame setup and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen your photos, and I hopefully a lot of other listeners have seen your photos, and they are absolutely amazing and stunning. The detail you can get is just like, it's all about glass, right? And I kind of wish that the new Canon RF 100 to 500 lens, and that's for their mirrorless camera, was available for the EF mount, because I would love that extra 100 millimeters. As a 100 to 400 that I have is an amazing lens. It is absolutely one of the greatest lenses I've ever used. But having that extra 500 or 100 millimeters on a full frame camera, I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. So fingers crossed that they'll make it for an EF mount, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess.
Yeah, I got a friend of mine, you may have seen him online, Turn to the Skies. Josh, he lives there in Sumter. He's got a Canon. He's got the 100-400 glass, but he's also been using the 1.4 extender. And
Okay.
I've considered maybe using those, but the downside is it does do one stop down in light, so that's something I'm not so willing to give up.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking like doing the 1.4 extender, especially for the low level stuff that I want to start getting into here soon. And I mean, I'll be shooting, hopefully weather won't be crap up there, or so it'll be extremely dangerous for me if the weather does turn up there. But I think just having that extra reach, like I wouldn't be shooting full aperture, or, you never know. It'll just be handy to have, especially on a full frame too. You get that extra boost, and
Yeah,
I just have to try it out and all that.
got a well lit environment, you're probably in good shape.
Oh yeah, that's when it starts getting cloudy and dark and miserable. That's when it just starts getting miserable for yourself too. But well, that's cool. You started out with Pentax, man. I mean, seems like a lot of guys who I've interviewed, they started out with Pentax, and like I have as well. So hopefully that's a good sign.
It was a good name for a long time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My grandfather, I still have his lenses from like the 60s and the 70s for the Pentax film cameras, and I've actually had a little mount I could put on my K30 and actually use those lenses. So one day I took his 200 millimeter prime lens that he had, and I put my mount on my K30, and I went out to the airport to go shoot with an old school glass like that. And actually it was pretty cool. It probably had a blue tint to it on the glass, so that kind of sucked, but this is actually really cool shooting in old school. Have to do your own f-stop and your own focus and stuff like that, and it was pretty fun, not gonna lie.
If you know what you're doing, it's a lot of fun, and when you don't know what you're doing, it can be frustrating.
That was me when I went out there. I'm going like, I'm trying to focus. I'm going, oh wait, autofocus? Oh no, and I was just trying, just doing stuff like that, and was trying to find the right aperture and the depth of field, and oh man, it was a cluster, but man, I had a great time doing it. All right, man, so we already discussed that your favorite airport is probably Shaw, and your airplane to spot is, actually, you know what is your favorite airplane to spot? Is it the
No,
is it the
believe it
Viper?
or not, it's the C-17.
Okay.
I've always had a fascination with it. When I was in middle school, I was in Civil Air Patrol and had the opportunity to do a summer camp down at Charleston. Back before it became a joint base, it was just Charleston Air Force Base, and back then they were flying the C-141.
Okay.
And we had a special presentation from, at the time it was a McDonnell Douglas airframe, and there were some folks from McDonnell Douglas that came and gave us a presentation about what was to come, and showed these awesome images of this big huge cargo plane with these big huge winglets. I just thought that was the coolest thing back in middle school. So I've always had a fascination with it. It's an extremely capable aircraft, and in fact it was one of the first freeware models I created way back for Microsoft FlightSim.
Oh wow. Well, bet that maybe some guys are interested. Is it for FlightSim 10?
The first one I did was actually for 2000, FS 2000, so it goes way back.
Okay, dang. I was about to say, if it's for FlightSim 10, I'll put a link to that in the description, and we could have our other guys download it. But, dang, that's old school, but that's really cool. You got to see some of the first public, renderings of the C-17, and just thinking how prolific and how amazing and capable that aircraft has become since the time when you first saw it. That's a really cool story that you were one of the first people to kind of see it. So is in Charleston your favorite airport as well to go spot at, or is it still Shaw?
I'd say those are the two. I would say Shaw, and then Charleston would be a close second.
Okay, and you're mainly a military photographer. Are you somewhat interested in the civil aviation aspect, or is it pretty strictly military?
Sometimes I have an opportunity. There's an aerodrome not far from where I am called Triple Tree. It's pretty well known in the remote controlled world. They have this huge event there in May, typically called the Joe Nile, And they also have a grass strip, and they'll have different fly-ins. And I've done a few photo shoots with some civilian stuff. Sometimes they have some pretty neat stuff out there. They had one year they had a DC-3 and a few Mustangs. And
oh wow!
I do tend to lean more toward the military, but if I have the opportunity to say, my least favorite would probably be, something like a Cessna 172. There's just so many of those flying around. I'll hear one flying over, I won't even really bother looking. But if I hear something with a nice jet roar to it, I'm gonna be looking.
Oh yeah, that's the same thing with me, man. You hear that kind of that low rumble or a high pitch kind of whine to it, and bam, I'm out that door with the camera in the hand to see what it is.
Yeah, my wife, she gives me a lot of grief in a joking way.
Oh yeah,
she'll see me run out in front of the house on our doorbell cam, and she knows exactly what I'm doing when I look up in the sky.
Yeah, that's the same thing with my girlfriend. She'll just like what are you doing? Like you look like an idiot. I'm like, hey, this is important things that we're doing here, right? Yes, I understand that. So you said that the C-17 is your favorite airplane to spot. Well, what is your favorite airplane just in general? Like, why is it your favorite?
I'd say the P-51D Mustang is the favorite all-time aircraft, and that stems from my dad. My dad has always had a love affair with that aircraft. I don't know if you recall the movie. What's the name of that movie? With it was the Steven Spielberg movie, and they had P-51s coming in at the end.
Oh,
Empire of the Sun. You remember that one?
Empire of the Sun.
Yeah. So, pretty old movie, but that had a pretty awesome scene with P-51s coming in and taking out the Zeros. So, that kind of spurred my interest in that particular warbird.
Very cool. Yeah, we have a guy out here in Boise. He owns 2 D models, and actually one of them is a real TF-51 Mustang, and the other one is his straight up D. That's a single seater only, hell or bust. And he flies those periodically, and man, those are really, really epic just to see. As you're out there working on the ramp, and then you see a taxi by, and just you kind of stop and just for a quick second and just listen to it take off, and it just echoes, and this is an amazing noise. You can't beat that Merlin.
Yeah, the engine noise is unmistakable, and the whistling noise of the air going over the gun holes is unmistakable.
And that radiator whine as well. Well, all right, so we already discussed your least favorite to spot as a Cessna 172. Anything else in particular that you're not really too fond of taking photo of?
I'd say most civil stuff. I'll go out and do it for like panning practice, but I don't. You can look at my account. I generally don't post a lot of civil.
Yeah, you got some absolutely stunning military stuff with the Viper demo team and stuff like that. And speaking of kind of Viper demo team, how is Venom? How does that look in person?
It's an impressive aircraft. In fact, that was going to be my unique story, because I got to see it fly for the first time back in May when they introduced it on the web, just as ground static. But, since they haven't been able to fly shows, the only time anybody would ever see it would be during a practice. And so it was pretty exciting to be one of the first to actually capture that thing on film and, publish it. It's a really inventive scheme. It was designed by Toro and Hutch on the team. Yep. So they did it themselves. They got the okay from the base commander to do a custom scheme on that particular airframe, and what you see is what you get. It's if you've got a backlit background, it actually doesn't look as awful as the traditional gray, because there's a good bit of contrast available with that scheme. So that's a pretty nice aside.
Yeah, I got to see the Viper demo team. Actually, almost a year ago this week over at Grand Junction, Colorado. That was my first time seeing the F-16 Viper demo, and holy crap. That's awesome.
They don't hold back, that's for sure.
They do not. I mean, that Toro does, rip that thing up. It's actually kind of cool. Is that was somewhat of Toro's home air show, because with him being from Price, Utah, we actually drove through Price. I flew down to Salt Lake and drove with my buddy from Salt Lake down to Grand Junction. We actually drove through Price, Utah, and it's kind of at his hometown, so a lot of his family and stuff was there watching the demo. So I think it was just a little bit better than anywhere else, just because he had all the family there and stuff like that.
Probably put a little extra something on it.
Yeah, I remember that second day. The second day is when the family was there, and he did the Faceful of America, and I think he went a little more than full send on that one, because it was a little bit closer and a little more epic that day. But it actually also rained that night, so there's actually some vapor in the air as well, which is equally as amazing. But not as much vapor as you get over there in South Carolina, I would guess. Well, it's kind of moving on from the least favorite spot. What is the rarest airplane you ever spotted?
So about 2 years ago, I was traveling for work and had to do some work in Sacramento, California. And back when they were having a huge opportunity with forest fires, I had the opportunity to spot the 747 global supertanker.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that was pretty cool. I just happened to have my camera with me on that trip, and caught a few images of that. So I think that's pretty unique. It's the only one that exists. So that was pretty neat to see.
Absolutely. Do you guys get any fire bombers out your way? Do you guys have any how does it work out there? Because I'm not really too sure how it works over in the East Coast and the South.
Typically, we don't have as big an opportunity, fortunately, and but when those opportunities do arise, the Air National Guard they'll take the Blackhawks, and they'll sling the big, huge, water bags. Yeah, exactly. And they'll, of course, they'll dip them in nearby lakes or ponds or whatever's close, and they'll use those. But that's few and far between, fortunately.
Well, Idaho has been really quiet. Was really quiet last year, and so far, knocking on wood, it is pretty quiet. It's very, very weird, because usually we get some of the largest wildfires in the country. I remember the Pioneer Fire in 2016 burned it burned actually a small town to the ground, and it gets really, really bad. And I remember we had another one, the Soda Fire, burned like over 1 million acres of this grassland to the south, and it got up to the point where people thought it was going to start jumping the Snake River Canyon, and just jumped the Snake River Canyon, then it rolled right into the Treasure Valley, where Boise and the bigger population area of southern Idaho is. And but I do love spotting the fire bombers. Those are some of my favorite things to spot, because it's just so unique. Like their BAE 146 Avros and DC 10s and stuff like that. It's like, where else are you going to spot this sort of stuff? So, but so you did some spotting at McClellan then also while you're down there?
I saw it was at McClellan.
You get anything else down there? You get the 10 tanker DC-10 or any Neptunes or Aeroflights?
That one was the only one that was there at the time. I'm guessing the other ones had probably been relocated or put in closer to the hot spots. But as far as I know, I think that one only flew in and out of McClellan. Yeah,
because it has the Cal Fire contract. Right. And for those that don't know, what that means is for fire bombers, there are different contracts. So this is specifically for Idaho, and I'll kind of relate to Cal Fire and stuff like that. So Idaho has a BLM contract, which is Bureau of Land Management, and the USFS, which is the United States Forest Service contract. So there are two different entities, and fire bomber companies like Neptune Aviation and Aeroflight and Global Supertanker and 10 Tanker, they all have to be contracted by the BLM or the Forest Service to be used on fires on those lands. So we have the Boise National Forest, a couple miles north of where I live. the companies have to obtain a Forest Service contract to use on that fire. And that's vice versa with BLM. So we have a fire that was south, i.e. the soda fire. Companies have to have a BLM contract. And then that's also a national contract too. So any on Forest Service land or BLM land, that's how that would work. Now, for the global supertanker, they don't have a Forest Service or BLM contract. However, they do have a CAL FIRE contract. And CAL FIRE is an entity by the state government of California to fight fires in the state of California and somewhat up in, Oregon and a little bit of Nevada. That's what CAL FIRE. So the global supertanker has a contract with CAL FIRE, and CAL FIRE they have S2s that they fly and some Broncos that they use still, which is pretty awesome. So hopefully the global supertanker will become a BLM and Forest Service contract, because I would absolutely love to see that 747 up here at Nissy. But that's kind of a tangent on that, but that's really cool. You got to see the global supertanker. I've yet to see it, and I really do hope that they bring her up here one day for at least a demonstration, so they can try and get a contract for the government.
Yeah, I think it's based out of Colorado.
Yeah, that's right. It also has a contract with Arizona and Colorado as well, I believe. It also depends on cost too, because at the end of the day, it's the government that has to pay it.
Yeah, it's something crazy, like thousands of dollars per drop. It takes a pretty good chunk of money.
It does. I know the 10 tanker guys, the DC-10 guys, they can carry up to 12,500 gallons of water or fire retardant, and their cost is just absolutely enormous, because they're also flying DC-10s. I mean, luckily there's still parts available for the DC-10, but still, it's just an old airplane. That 747 is the same thing. At least there's a plentiful parts for 747, but like Neptune's old P2Vs that they retired a couple of years ago now, those were the only ones left, and parts dried up, and you keeping a 60-year-old airplane still flying with engines from a B-29 Super Fortress is, I guess, a little bit difficult here and there. Well, what's your favorite event or location outside of general airport photography that you like?
I've actually got two. My most favorite of those would be the homecoming show down at NAS Pensacola, and that's when it's traditionally the season end for the Blue Angels, and it's a Saturday only show, believe it or not. And when the Blues are done at the end of that show on that Saturday, when they drop the salute, that's when the new team goes into effect. And that goes for the enlisted and the officers. So as soon as they do that, name tags on lockers and everything gets swapped out almost immediately. So it's pretty wild. And of course it's homecoming, so you'll see a bunch of former Blues and former team members just hanging out and talking with people. It's a pretty exciting event. And the second one I would say is my most favorite is NAS Oceana, and the reason for that is they have a pretty awesome what they call a power demo. And I fortunately back in the late 90s had the opportunity to go when they were still flying the F-14, and that was an incredible aircraft to see in person. Back then I still had film cameras, and you get a roll of 24 shots. You have to be pretty picky about what you take a picture of. So most of the images I took back in those days were either it on the ground or taxiing, something I knew I was going to make sure it was in focus and clear. But man, I really wish I had a digital camera back then to get it flying, because it was something else. But their power demo continues to be a phenomenal demonstration with the Super Hornets and the Legacy Hornets, and they'll come in and drop a helicopter, mock a pilot down, or it's pretty phenomenal.
Now, I had an opportunity to go to Oceana, I think in 2018, and I didn't go, and I kind of kicked myself in the butt for not going, because that's like a show I really want to go to now. But real quick, with the F-14, they have they had a demo team out there too for the Tomcat, right?
I don't know if they officially had a team, but they did have an F-14 demonstration. That was, was solely it flying around. And you can look on YouTube and see a whole bunch of, older videos showing it off, man. It's again, that sucker, I heard it was a maintenance nightmare, but when it was flying and flying well, it really it was a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, I really wish I had the opportunity to see the Tomcat in the air. I might have at an air show at one point when I was growing up, but I was obviously too young to remember. So going back to Pensacola, with the Blue Angels transitioning to the Super Hornet after this season, assuming, we don't know if they're going to keep it on for just another year because of the situation that we're in. Were they planning on anything special for the transition from the Legacy to the Super down there for their homecoming show this year?
Back when they transitioned from the A4 to the F-18 back in, I think it was the end of the 86 season and going into the 1987 season. Yeah, they had, they would invite a lot of special people. When they finally, taxied back with their A4s, the number 7 pilot for the oncoming year taxied out the F-18, right? So it was, it was a nice event, and I anticipate they'll do something similarly if they even still have the event. That's the concern right now is, are they even still going to have homecoming? Because so many air shows have been being canceled. I think there's one coming up Wednesday at Cheyenne.
Yeah. I was, and we're recording this on July 20th, 2020, and that air show was on July 22nd, a Wednesday. It starts at 7 a.m. It's only in the morning, and I've never seen an air show schedule like that before. It just kind of sucks because I would have loved to go over there and drive over there, but I can't take the time off of work right now. And if it was on like a Friday, I actually have a Friday off from work on my schedule, which is extremely uncommon for me to have like a Friday or off. And I'm like, okay, well, how long would a drive from Boise to Cheyenne be if I can make it there by 7 a.m.? I get off work at midnight, and it's a 10.5-hour drive. So I'm going, crap. Like, I'll be like missing, like I'll be arriving at the very end of the show, and that would suck.
Especially since they don't have the Thunderbirds anymore. So right now, I think they got the A-10, the F-22, and the F-35.
The F-35. So all they need is Toro to come over, and then they have the Quadfectra. But they do have a B-1 flyby, which, B-1 flyby. They're going to have a B-52 and a B-2 flyby. But the B-52 and the B-2, they never heard from. And probably the B-2 will fly over, just you won't know it.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you look to Contra to the west, there is your B-2 flyover.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is not only is it very early in the day, it's drive-in only, which seems to be, I guess, a growing trend. They're also going to have a show in London, Ontario, coming up, and it's going to be a drive-in only event. So, if they were to decide down at Pensacola to have drive-in only, I don't know if they've got enough room, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a pretty decent size tarmac, but still, you got to have a place to put the airplanes, and there's just not a lot of room for that. So, it very well may be a private event, for the transition. Hopefully they would do the aviation enthusiast community the favor of broadcasting it live, like we've seen some of the other events. I think they had one a few weeks in Cedar Creek, right? So it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. My wife and I had planned to go, but with it tentatively up in the air if it's even going to happen, we haven't quite made travel plans, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, hopefully, fingers crossed that something does happen, and fingers crossed that we people of this country or whomever else that they can start getting, making small sacrifices for the whole country, for the greater good. I mean, we won't get into that. That's a whole different topic for a whole different day, but we're not going to get into that. But man, at least air shows are starting to happen a little bit, whether it be driving or whatever. At least they're actually happening, and that's something we all can be thankful for right now. Just unfortunately, just too few and far between. This sucks that Edwards Air Force Base canceled as well, because that was a show I was extremely looking forward to. I was planning that one out back like in November of last year, and now they're moving to the virtual air show, which just doesn't do it for me. But real quick, have you ever been to Red Flag?
I haven't had the opportunity to go out to Nellis, but that's it's on my bucket list.
Oh, for sure. Hopefully they have a 21-1. You need to make it out there, because that's usually the best light of the year. And if you do, man, let me know, and I'll get down there with you. But, well, you already told us about Venom. Well, what else do you have about a spotting story that you would want to tell us?
Like I mentioned, I had the opportunity to go hang out with an Apache pilot, which was pretty dang cool. He found me on Instagram and invited me over to McIntyre, and had the opportunity to watch several Apaches take off, and it was pretty funny. They were doing some detonation on the airfield because they're testing some repair material. So they were blowing holes in old unused runways just for the purpose of seeing how well they could repair. And so that was pretty neat, seeing them shoot off C5 or C4 explosive across the way when we were out there photographing Apaches. So that was a unique event.
Absolutely. Did you get any photos like fireballs or gravel and stuff in the air with the Apaches or anything
we were
like
hoping
that?
Something like that could have been timed out, but they couldn't get the Apaches up in the air quite soon enough. But yeah, it didn't do this huge ball of flame or anything. You just saw this big white puff of disintegrated concrete take off. So yeah, so that was pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I discussed this with the last episode with Aaron, but we used to have Apaches for the Idaho Army Guard here in Boise, and man, I remember the days. I remember that was along with the A-10, I grew up with the Apache, because it was always the A-10, the Black Hawk, and the Apache, and I used to see Apaches over my house every single day. One of the higher-ups officers that flew the Apache lived 2 houses down from me, so we used to see Apaches to come over and circle his house, just because they knew where he lived, and then they would fly back to Gowan. And I got to go up and see them up close and personal, and different settings and all that at Gowan, and like I discussed last week with Aaron as well, we had 2 Apaches land at my elementary school the last day of school back in 2003, which was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. But yeah, I love the Apache, and that's really cool. I mean, it's good out there when they're blowing stuff up too. I'm like, how epic is that? How great of a timing is that?
Yeah, couldn't time it any better.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, let's start wrapping it up, man. Do you have any tips, words of encouragement, or anything like that for the listener out there that you're willing to share?
Back when I started, I had no idea. I would just, I shot JPEG because I didn't know any better. My words of encouragement would be shoot raw. It takes more memory, and it may slow your camera down, but the ability to post-process in RAW greatly outweighs, those 2 things. So that would be my biggest suggestion. And I've got some advice for folks on Instagram. If you want to build a bigger following, my advice would be to post at least once a day. Try to post a variety of photos, different types of aircraft. Don't use the same hashtags over and over again. Those, for whatever reason, Instagram kind of, I don't know how they do it, but they kind of keep a track of what hashtags you're using. And if you start using them over and over again, you'll start looking like a bot. and that's the last thing you want to do if you're trying to build a follower group. So definitely try to change it up a little bit, on the hashtag. So
I will be taking that one into account because I generally use the same hashtag, except for the only variations like it's relating to a certain aircraft or airline. But I am going to be taking
a lot of
on that
people
one.
go cut and pasting, and just some standard ones they're using over and over again. I do have my favorites that I'll do, but I've got like 4 or 5 different groups, and I'll try to pick one day and pick another day, and then go back to a new one. Just kind of you just kind of keep it. It's got to be relevant too.
Yeah.
You can't just throw beach party on an airplane pic and think that's going to catch some lookers or some likes.
Yeah. Well, okay. I am taking that one into advice. I actually want to be doing that for my next post. So, thank you on that part, man. I appreciate it. So, speaking of Instagram, where can we find your work, man? We know we can get to your Instagram here in a second, but do you have like a Facebook page for your photos or a Flickr or anything like that? Or where can people find you?
Facebook.com/OwenAVPhoto. It's a page, but I also have a group that you can link to there if you'd like to join. I do have a website, OwenAVPhoto.com. My Twitter account is @OwenAVPhoto. And I do have Flickr. I don't have a whole lot of stuff on there, but over time I'll try to build it up a little bit more than I've got. But for the most part, you're going to find me posting mostly on Instagram, owen.aviation.photo. Primarily, that's where you're going to see my content.
Okay, yeah, and actually, I just followed you back on Twitter because you followed me right before we started here. And do you upload to airliners.net or jetphotos.com or anything like that?
I'm kind of on the same wavelength of, I don't particularly care for somebody else critiquing my photo and nitpicking. I get enough of that in the general public, but I'm just kidding. I really don't. But it just never appealed to me. So
yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea and all that. I mean, I do here and there, and it's just kind of fun to get my photos out on there. But everybody, go check him out, and trust me, you will not be disappointed in what you see. It's if you want to see vapor, this is the guy to go see some vapor from. But yeah, anyway, Owen, appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on here and talk planes with me here. Thank you for being one of actually the first listeners of the AvSP, and I really, really, really do appreciate all your support that you've given me for this. But anyway, this is the part of the show where I always say, if you know somebody who wants to come on and talk aviation with me, send me an email to avspotterspodcast@gmail.com. Drop me a DM on Twitter and Instagram @BOISpotter. Send us a message on Facebook, Aviation Spotters Podcast. Make sure to go like, share, follow, do whatever, get the word out. I really appreciate that. And anyway, man, Owen, anything else to add?
Nah, man. Just keep your cameras clicking. Keep those batteries charged.
Like I always say too, keep those batteries charged and those cameras ready. I'll catch you next time here on the Aviation Spotters Podcast.